So I want to speak to you about flow, and maybe I must just start with you the whole thing about how did I get to this whole concept of flow, because there's a lot of words that can describe flow. There's like in the zone, in the moment, I'm absorbed. There's a lot of things that describe flow, but I want to take you into the neuroscience of flow. And because of my background, I'm always fascinated about performance, because I always say to people, life is a numbers game. If you're not performing, you're stealing. I wish I can teach this for with all respect for politicians. You have to perform. If you're not performing, something is wrong. And that's where I come from. So flow, if you look at the definition of flow, it's a state of optimal performance. I'm going to say it slowly. Flow is a state of optimal performance where people perform and feel at their best. It's a state of optimal performance where people feel and perform at their best. And the acronym that they use to define flow is the word STIR. So they use the S, the T, the E, and the R. And the first thing to get into flow, the S stands for selflessness. So people, if your ego is in the way, you won't get into flow. And with all respect, I think this is what Rossi Erasmus does really well within the context of the Springboks. I had the privilege as the pastor to marry Dion Fourie. Another day I was like meeting with him. And he says, one thing about Rossi, there's no egos. If there's an ego, they are gone. So the first thing is selflessness. The E stands for effortlessness. So when I go into flow, I start doing things like I don't even know I'm doing it. It's like effortlessness. It's like I become one with something. The T stands for timelessness. So it's S-T-E-R. So it's selflessness, timelessness. Then the E is effortlessness. The T, timelessness. Now what happens with flow? When people get into flow, they lose track of time. It's like 5 minutes feels like 5 hours, or 5 hours feels like 5 minutes. Now, it's interesting, if you realize what happens in flow, a lot of people will tell you, you need to use more of the brain. It's absolute rubbish. You need to use less of the brain. Because when you go into flow, the neuro thing they call it hypotransfrontality. Hypotransfrontality. So the prefrontal cortex, where you think what I must do, gets overrun. And that's where, when the prefrontal cortex kicks out, that's where your time configuration lies. That's why when you go into flow, your prefrontal cortex shut down and you get into flow. You don't think, you just do it. That's why children gets easier into flow. Why? Because they don't, sometimes as adults, overthink things. And the R stands for richness. So that's why the research reveals that when people get into flow, people that often has a high flow lifestyle will experience a lot of meaning, a lot of purpose, and a lot of joy. But here's the thing. What happens when you get into flow? So the neuroscience reveal, and this is like quite cutting edge neuroscience, that it's the only state where the brain releases 5 neurochemicals. So when you fall in love, it's at the most 3. But when you get into flow, it's 5 neurochemicals. Let me quickly talk to you. The first one is dopamine. The next one is serotonin. Other one is norepinephrine. Other one is endorphins. And the last one is anandamide. Those are the 5 neurochemicals. Dopamine, it equals cocaine. It's a feel-good thing. Norepinephrine, it speed up things. It's quicker. The Americans will say it's faster. Endorphins, it's 100 times stronger than morphine. That's when people will get into flow. I'll show you now, a guy by the name of Danny Way jumped the China wall with a skateboard by breaking his leg the first time he attempted it. And with his broken leg, because the endorphins kicked in, and then realize it. That's how much pain you can take the moment you get into flow, because it's absolute 100 times endorphin stronger than morphine. The anandamide equals marijuana. That's why when people get into flow, it's a marijuana state. And serotonin is known for what? For creativity, motivation, and learning. Now, it's interesting, I'm not a big learner. You probably won't see it. I'm a certified strength coach, the Strength Finder, which is a tool that I often use in companies, always. But if you look at my strength profile, my learner is not very high. So learning is a lot of effort for me. Then a couple of years ago, I went through a tough emotional time, and I ended up with a psychiatrist, and he put me on serotonin. It's like suddenly I started reading books. You can literally see my learning since I actually went on that medication went like that. So serotonin, when people get into flow, their learning levels go up. And that's why I personally think that which we need to get the teachers, how to teach, how to create environments, how to create classrooms where there's flow. So the work of flow is known by the most important scholar is a guy by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He wrote the book Flow. He was a very known psychologist. He died a year ago. So they call him the father of flow. But then a guy by the name of Steven Kotler. Now, this is probably one of the most revolutionary books you can read. The book's called The Rise of Superman. So buy the book. It's a great book to read. But Steven Kotler was this journalist. And in the 80s and 90s, he was following extreme sport oaks. Now, in the 80s and 90s, extreme sport oaks were like weird oaks. Those were like the outcasts. They were in the bush. They were in the sea. So these were the guys that did what they do. They was doing skateboard. They were doing like these monster waves where they ride these monster waves. They were doing skydiving. They were doing kayaks in these like rivers that's like absolutely in flood. And when you start studying these things, and when they got these insane things right, he had interviews with these guys. And they all mentioned the same thing. Stir. Selflessness. Because why selflessness? Because the moment that guy goes into that deed of a skydive he can lose his life. That's why they get it right. Because the moment you become selflessness, it's the entry point for flow. The moment they do these insane things, especially when they end up in trouble, in that accident or what they need to do, they will realize that their brain shuts down where there's the timelessness. Like that, they don't completely lose track of time. And then they will get into this whole thing about they just make it happen. It's effortlessness. And then after they've done it, they had this amazing highs. That's why flow gets addictive, because it's stronger than falling in love. Now, when Steven Kotler studied these guys, he realized, but you don't have to get that extreme to get into flow. And then I read the book, The Rise of Superman. So then the other book you can also read is the book of Carl Newport called Deep Work, which is also a flow book. So I would strongly recommend you read Steven Kotler's book. It's got a couple of great books. The first one reads The Rise of Superman. The other, his following up one is Stealing Fire. For those guys who got very strong moral beliefs, read it a bit with the tongue in the cheek in the tongue. And then his newest one is The Art of the Impossible, which is also a great book to read. It's all about flow. And then I did the course. It cost me nearly 100,000 Rand to do the flow course. And I just realized, like, if I can get companies and CEOs and teams into flow, something amazing is going to happen in companies. So here's my question to you guys. How do you achieve flow in your business? That's the question. Now, before we get into how do you get it, let me quickly talk to you about a couple of things that can block flow. And guys, there's probably many things that you know. So there's what they call it flow blockers. Now, flow blockers, and here's a couple of flow blockers. Your mindset can be a flow blocker. And they go into the work of Carol Dweck. You either got a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So mindset can be a bit. Distraction. By the way, I'm doing a course for companies on distraction management. A lot of companies, and we're going to hear this now, I'm going to share it with you also, they get distracted a lot. You can't get in flow if you're getting distracted. Another blocker is burnout. Friends, I don't know if you see this, one of the things that they gave me as dealing with, as part of the course, this is called the Aura Ring. There's nothing in the world that measures your sleep so accurately like this thing. And I became a sleep disciple. If you want to get in flow, you have to sleep properly. And the big thing about sleep is what? How many hours of deep sleep you get a night. If you're not getting 50 plus minutes deep sleep a night, you're not going to get into flow. That's so important. And how do you set up, especially with sleep? I became a sleep disciple. There's two big rules when you sleep. The room, pitch dark, and 18 degrees Celsius. Cold. And then you get into deep sleep. So this whole thing about, no, I can get away with 5 hours, you're not going to get into flow. It's a blocker. Another one is exhaustion. We all know that. Overwhelm. You know, we're going to talk about now, about the skill ratio balance. If the challenge is higher than the skills, you're going to overwhelm people. Another blocker is clarity. One of the big things about getting into flow is get people clarity. Because the moment I need to get into flow, and I'm going to explain it to you now, I need to become really focused on what I need to do. This whole concept of multitasking is absolute rubbish. People are not made to multitask. And if you want to get into flow, you need to stop all these things. Now, a lot of people say, but this is me. I said, doesn't mean that you must stop all these things, but, stop running around between all these things. Because sometimes you need to stop all these things and focus and get clarity. Another one is motivation. Time is a big blocker, stress, and self-sabotage. Now, there's a couple of interesting things. This comes from, according to the Gallup American Institute of Stress, World Health Organization. The current way we work is a train wreck. The average knowledge worker is 84% is stressed, 67% is burnout, 67% is disengaged, 70% of people is chronically distracted, 58 trust strangers more than their boss. People don't leave companies. They leave in Sandton, they say they leave a manager. Okay. 53% is unhappy at the work and 3% lack clarity. The first question of getting employee engagement is giving clarity of what's expected of you. Now, here's an interesting thing. The average knowledge worker hours of a work per day is half the day duplicates work. Half a day he duplicates work in the week. There's a half day that he spends actually unknowingly duplicating work. 22.2 hours of work per day. Guys, the average knowledge worker is 2.2 hours productive a day. That's how bad it is. Now, just imagine if we can get that 2.2 up to 3, or maybe to 4. Where are we going? So the point I want to make is 36 emails checked per hour. That's the average knowledge worker. 56 disruptions per day. 11 minutes focus per day. And 43% distractions, the self-inflicted. This is the importance of understanding flow, because all those blockers are causing these things. Now, here's my question. So why is flow important? So there's a lot of research that's done on flow. And I'm going to just share with you, the research has shown that flow to be highly correlated with measures of performance from creativity, decision-making, and information processing to skills acquisition, collaboration, motivation. McKinsey and Company, the research, they studied CEOs. CEOs that gets into flow, so performance goes up with 500%. You can go Google that article. It's a brilliant article about McKinsey. So what they say is that what a normal CEO would do in 5 days, he can do in 1 day. Just imagine if what I spread out in 5 days, I can do in 1 day because I hack flow. Where's my productivity going? The other research, you have Harvard says 3 days of heightened creativity after the flow state. The DARPA organization said a plus 490% faster skill acquisition. If you read the book of Stephen Kotler, the Stealing Fire, they worked with the Navy SEALs. One of the most toughest guys to train in the Navy SEALs team is the sniper. Because that's the guy that goes and lie at the top there, and he's watching everything. And he has to take the enemy out while he helps his buddies to fight. They said it takes years to teach a good sniper. Now, by hacking flow in the training of the Navy SEALs, they train the snipers in half the time. Because why? Because the moment you get into flow, your learning goes exponentially up. And then a 430% increase in creative problem solving. University of Sydney. Why does flow matter? I'm going to just keep going. The number one management metric you need to know, flow state percentage. That's what Forbes says. The Fast Company says, being able to control and harness these feelings of flow is the holy grail for any manager. And then Deloitte also said, in all our studies of extreme performance improvement, the people and organizations who covered the most distance in the shortest time were always the ones who were tapping into passion and finding flow. Okay, now, that is why flow is so important. And I personally believe if we can create environments, but here's the thing, you need to understand how flow works. Now, flow has got a cycle. And the flow cycle is a very interesting cycle. You need to understand, you need to get through the flow cycle. The flow, you're not going to get... You can take photos. Just pay me afterwards, please. Okay. Remember what the Bible says, huh? Faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of that three is cash flow. It's just a joke. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give you another photo, which is much better. So here's the flow cycle. Okay. So look at the first. So it starts here, and it goes there, and it goes there, and it ends there. So we need to teach people how the flow cycle works. So the first cycle of flow is struggle. You struggle to get into flow. Make peace with that. Now, guys, most of you guys around this table, you've studied. Sometimes you have to go and sit down and study. Is it easy? You go there and you go like, maybe I must just pack my book rack, just order the books right there. Maybe I must make myself a cup of tea. Maybe I must just make that phone call. Maybe I must just just go take the dog for a walk. Yes. So the point I want to make, we need to make peace that it's not easy for people to get into flow. Flow is a struggle. So it's like, and I always tell people, it's like studying. To go and sit down and put your head down and focus is a struggle. That's part of flow. You have to break through that. Then, the moment you get through the struggle phase, now what happens in most companies, they never get through the struggle phase. They get distracted, and then they want to get back to flow. Then it's twice as hard to get back to flow, because then the struggle is worse. That's why one of the things I'm going to teach you guys that people need to learn is that make your environment distraction-free so it allows you to get through the struggle phase. So there isn't going to be any distractions. Then, the moment you get into the release phase, and the research revealed that this is where dopamine actually comes in. They also talk here about nitric oxide, but dopamine is the drug that helps you to focus. But you need to get to the struggle, so the release phase. So remember when you go and study and you get to that, okay, I've walked the dog and now I'm getting into, okay, there I go. I get into that zone. And then you hit flow. Now, the research revealed that you need to build like up from 90 to 120 minutes flow sessions. You need to build in for yourself. Okay. So flow is where you get into that state where you lose track of time. And I remember, when I studied, it's like you get into that zone and you start absorbing the work and you get really productive. And then the research revealed also, just before you want to keep going, you're actually at the top of your flow state, you need to stop. You don't need to deplete it. You actually, when you're in that high flow zone, before it goes down a bit, because you can only stay there as long as for a moment, like they say, up until 120 minutes, about 2 hours. Then you need to stop. And then you need to get into the recovery phase. Now, the recovery phase is very interesting. To recover from flow, most people recover passively. And here's the hard soul. And when I taught this to my children, especially when they studied, and when I especially taught this to students, most students recover by doing what? Playing games. What happens there? Dopamine, which they need to get into flow again, to get to the struggle phase. Now they keep depleting that, which makes the struggle phase even more. So this, when you sit in companies, look at how many people get onto social media as a recovery. Just wanted to check what's my Facebook. The point is, you actually sabotaging yourself to get into the next flow state. And that's why a lot of people, that when you recover, you need to recover. We call it active recovery. What is active recovery? Go for a walk. Yes, doing breathing exercise. They even go like further, say like doing a boring activity. Doing a boring activity that actually bores you, like breathing or walking, or maybe just reading an article or maybe just close your eyes and just calm your brain down. Okay. So this is the struggle. So you guys look worried. Okay. Now, we need to understand that as a cricket player, when you face bowling from 140 kilometers, 90 miles an hour, you can't just stand like this and face it. You need to get a trigger that gets you going. Okay. The same with flow. Look at, I think always A.B. de Villiers with Jaw Colours was brilliant when they bat. Remember, he used to stand like this, and then as the bowler runs in, just before the bowler bowls, they go like, they got a thing that triggers them to get in line or to move, so the kick gets them going. The same with flow. We need to understand that flow has got triggers. And the triggers, there's individual triggers. Up and now, it looks like they got 22 triggers, and they got group triggers. And I'm going to share with you a couple of these triggers, and we can talk about these triggers. But, and then also on the individual triggers, you get internal triggers and external triggers. I'm going to also show you that. So we need to understand what are those triggers that will get me into line so I can hit the ball and score runs. Otherwise, that's going to overwhelm me. So here is the first couple of triggers, internal triggers. So the first one is passion, purpose, and curiosity. That is a trigger for people to understand their passion, their purpose, and their curiosity. That's a trigger. Another one is autonomy. Now, whom have you ever read the book of Daniel Pink? Drive. Drive. Yeah, I think that's the best one. So what is the main motivator of people? Autonomy. Give people autonomy to do their work. Whomever read the book of Liz Wiseman, Multipliers? It's probably one of the best books you can read, because a lot of people think they give autonomy to people, but they're actually not. They're still controlling things. So Multipliers is a great book because it distinguishes between a multiplier and a diminisher. You think you're a multiplier, but you're actually a diminisher because you're not creating autonomy. That's also, I think, two great books you can read to understand autonomy. It's complete concentration. How do the trigger is I need to get, so guys, when I was in America now, I was on this coaching symposium. Did you guys see that there's a new thing out of Lego called serious play? And I've done it a day before yesterday. I took the board of directors and I gave them each one 50 pieces of Lego. And I said, build a structure of where do you see the company in 5 or 10 years. And it's amazing. The moment people start, that's why Lego is so amazing. Why? Because Lego is a flow tool. Why? Because it allows you to completely concentrate. And we're going to also clear a look about, it absorbs you. So you want to create clear, complete concentration. Immediate feedback. That's a very important flow trigger for people. This whole thing about, it's my yearly feedback report. What the rubbish is that? After 6 months, I'm going to talk to you and give you the last 6 months it's immediate. It's like, it's like the coach that stands next to the net and say, whoa, you triggered too quickly. Or, whoa, listen, your head's moving too quickly over. Keep your balance upright. There's that immediate effect. And then you hit that ball, and as you hit it, the coach says, yes, there's it. That you feel it. Immediate feedback. That gets you into flow. Clear goals. Guys, this is so important. Clear goals. So when I go into companies, one of the things I teach is the daily huddle. So everyone, every morning, as a team comes together and they need to articulate what's the most important thing they want to achieve for the day. Not what they're going to do. What they want to achieve, the goal. Because people will say, same as yesterday. I was busy. Or they go, I've now got this to-do list. I don't want a to-do list. I want to know every day what's the most important thing you want to achieve. With detail. I want to go and visit John because I need to clarify that deal we need to make, and I need to write the email after that to the team to say the deal is on or not on. That's a goal. That needs to be clarified. And then the challenge skills ratio. Now, this is the one that I really think is very important to understand to get into flow, because you've probably seen this graph before. And this is the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So to get into a high level of flow, you need to heighten the challenge, but also heighten the skills. Now the research reveals, so when Stephen Kotler studied these high-performing people, especially those skydivers and the Travis Pastrana who jumps out of an airplane without a parachute, and that Felix Baumgarten, those guys all hack flow. That's what they do. Complete concentration, absorbed in activity, clear goals. It's all what they do. Then he realizes if the challenge needs to always be not more than 4% higher than the skills level. The moment the challenge gets higher than 4 levels, past the skills level, people will go into anxiety. Okay. The reverse is also true. When the skills level is too high, and they get bored, which I know a lot of people are in their work. They are bored. So And this is a great tool. You can just have a conversation with people. So where's your flow levels? What do you need to be? Do we need to up the skills levels, or do we need to up the challenge? So this is a very important internal flow trigger, is the challenge skills balance. It's a trigger. Get it up. There's also another individual triggers. Risk is these are the external triggers. So you make the risk a bit bigger. That hacks flow. Novelty. Why is traveling such a high flow state? It's novelty. Complexity. That's external flow trigger. Unpredictability. That's also external flow trigger. And then deep embodiment. Back to the Lego. When people get deeply embodied, so like Lego, I was watching those directors with it. So the one hand is here on the block, the other one is here on this thing, but they completely embodied into this whole thing. With all, kinesthetically, everything. Right. Then there's group triggers. Group triggers are shared goals, which I call the common goal. A lot of people say, what's the common goal? No, it's budget. It's not the common goal. Okay. Another one is close listening. When people sit around the table and they listen to each other, I'm talking about, deep listening. It's an amazing flow state that happens. Another one is yes and. What does yes and mean? So by the way, this comes from Amazon. At Jeff Bezos, when there's a discussion, although it sounds like a stupid idea, and you say, no, it can't work, they force you to take a piece of paper out and write a whole page on why you would say it won't work, because it kills creativity. One of the values I heard at Amazon is yes and. You're only allowed to say, although you think it's stupid, yes and? That's a group flow trigger. When people start saying, no, what a stupid idea, change it with yes and? Sense of control. It's another blending egos. So important. Equal participation, shared risk, constant communication, and then familiarity and trust. And this is which I, when I work with teams, the first thing I install on teams is I get the trust levels up. Because the moment the trust levels gets up in a team, and here's my question to people, how do you build trust in a team? And then I always say to the leader, it starts with you. Do you guys know how you build trust in a team?
Vulnerability.
First one?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. You build trust by becoming vulnerable among your team members. So great teams often, especially the leader, because he leads it, often say the following: I was wrong, guys. I made a mistake. I don't know. Forgive me. I should have never ever said that. Those are things that drives trust. And by the way, drives flow. Okay. And there's a new one. I actually need to make more, but they call it the creative trigger. So you get individual triggers, you get group triggers, and you get creative triggers, creativity and pattern recognition. So that's another way they can trigger flow. Okay. So my question is, where does it begin? Where does flow begin? With yourself. So we as leaders needs to start modeling the flow triggers and explaining to people how flow work. We need to create environments where flow can happen. But because, my friends, and I want to end up with this, what is the ROI of flow? What is the return of investment? A lot of people will say, it's just about we're going to get more numbers and better results. Yes, but that's 50%. What's the other return of investment? People in flow find purpose, meaning, and passion for their lives. So flow is not just for the numbers to achieve certain goals. It's a huge thing about, meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in their life. In Afrikaans, we will say, fluit, fluit, my story is uit. In English, we will say, whistle, whistle, my story is gone. Okay. So thank you. Any questions?